Well, my name is Earl Scott, and from Crossfield, Alberta, and we have Scott Stock Farm. And basically, we started in the Angus business about 30 years ago, and it was all due to my son joining 4-H club. And the first year he joined the 4-H club, he had a steer, and he got down to the 4-H show in Calgary on parade, and he seen that a lot of kids also had heifers, and so he come back home and he said, you know what, he says, I want a black Angus heifer. And said, okay, so that was the start of our business, and we after that we started buying heifer each year, and as things grew, and a couple years later, my daughter started 4-H, and she wanted a heifer project as well, but of course she didn't want the same color as my son, so she wanted red Angus. So that's why at Scott Stock Farm we have black and red Angus. It was basically started with our children wanting to be in 4-H and heifer projects. So.
I'm John Lee. We have in the family have Chico ranches. We're originally from BC, dairy farmers, and that. And after college, I was back in Alberta with a company, and really truly saw the opportunities for agriculture, both politically and business-wise in Alberta. And my brother-in-law and sister were in the States. He's an American, and he was the Angus component. But we always kind of liked Angus. So 1974, we purchased our first ranch in the Camrose area of Alberta, and later added the following year another ranch next to it, and we ran some of the European exotic cattle as well as the Angus, but the basic was always black Angus. And so from 1974 through till today, we still maintain a lot smaller herd of black Angus today. So.
Okay, Brian Good. I currently work with the association, have for 20 years, but before that, pretty much born into the Angus breed through my family. We started in my dad started in the Angus business in 1957, along with his brother John, and that was kind of neat. The way they started was, Dad was the superintendent at he was the president of the Holman School, that's what it was, and in Red Deer for the country school, and there was a fellow there by the name of Mac McCullough that was the superintendent at that time for the region, and he had a lot of Angus cattle. In fact, he had Angus cattle in 4 different countries when he passed away, but he got my dad going on a share basis on them cattle, and it led to one thing led to another, and established a fairly big herd. In fact, probably in the early 70s, we had, I think, the second largest registration herd in Canada at that time, and we put on a number of production sales on our farm. So I'm pretty well born and raised with the Angus breed, and just to lead a little bit into Earl's comment, I met Earl through Western Breeders. He didn't mention that, but maybe well later on. You were the head man there for a long time, Earl.
Yes, that's
John,
right.
I met John back when they started Angus cattle at Bittern Lake, and it was so I know these two fellows pretty darn good. So some interesting stuff.
Stories.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of our kids' 4-H projects also came from Chico Ranch, John and Jen. So
nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess the other thing that's interesting is all 3 of us have been involved not only in the Angus breed as in terms of the cattle, but also the rest of it. And of course, Brian, for a number of years now, employed by them, doing a great job. But we became active, and I think all of us had the philosophy that you give back to take out. And of course, I've always said the purebred cattle business, my dad always told me, whether it was Holsteins or Angus or whatever, it's a people business, and so became active in first off the Alberta Angus Association and then through to the Canadian Angus and different things. And you know, whether it was a committee at a local fair or whether it was at the national board level, you know, you always felt that you needed to step up and contribute, and World Angus Forums were one of those that came along that gave us an opportunity, or gave me an opportunity, to meet so many great people and work with a huge number of great Canadians, but also meet people from around the world. So, and Earl and Brian have been, any of those endeavors that I've been involved with, they've always been part of it as well.
1970 or 71, I'm not positive at which year, but that was the first forum I attended. So I was quite young then. I was 17 or 18 years old. And it was in Kansas City, Missouri. And the Alberta Angus Association at the time sent 6 bulls down there. And there were different breeders that sent them. Well, my dad was one, South Home Angus was one, Hochsteins were one, Spadies were one, Ralph Griffiths was one, and South Home Angus, or did I say that already?
Yeah.
Was one. I'm missing one somewhere there, but them bulls went down to Kansas City that time, and I was one of the helpers. I was myself, Ralph Griffiths, and Gary Sazina. And them bulls were so much bigger and longer and taller than anything there, it wasn't even funny. And they happened to have the show. At that time, they had a big show, and them bulls pretty well bottomed out in every class. They stood last in every class. But at the end of the show, I remember going back to the stall, and you couldn't get near it. It was just swarming with people, because they'd never seen anything like them bulls. And at that time, they had the little fellas that could crawl under this table, and that's what was winning. And there was some guys there that we met at that time. You talk about people meeting people, John. Ed Winters, do you remember Ed Winters with, what was the name of their ranch? From Montana, I forget.
Yeah.
But he treated us good. Some didn't, some did. And I remember getting in the night before. I flew in, got the straw ordered up, got it all down to the stall, and thought, well, I'll go down in the morning and shake it up, eh? Well, I went down in the morning all right, but there was no straw there. They took it all. So, you know, that's just how we got treated. They didn't like us outsiders at that time. So that was the first forum I went to. After that, really I didn't go to any in between, and I think you guys did. I'm just trying to think here. The next one would have been 85, I think, in Edmonton, that I was involved in anyway. So I'll let you.
Well, my involvement with World Angus Forum, of course, I think the first World Angus Forum was 1969, I believe. And then the U.S. hosted the second one, I believe is how it went in history. But we weren't involved in the Angus business. I was in college back then, I guess, till 73. And really, I didn't get involved with the World Angus Forum till 1985 when it was hosted here in Alberta, in Canada, the Canadian one. And Chico Ranches at the time, we didn't know a lot about the World Angus Forum, but I was on the Alberta board, I think, at that time. And Brian, I believe you were finance chair, and I was one of the rookies. And anyway, we became involved, and we took a display and displayed a cow-calf, I remember, and had lots of pictures, and that was before videos and all of this type of thing were there. So you kind of did the picture show of the stills. But a highlight was of that forum, besides meeting all those people, was the Queen Mother, of course, came, and they shut off the brand new facility in Edmonton. At the time at Farm Fair, it was shut off to the public for that morning. I remember there was a great to-do, and where they were going to go, it was all mapped out. And fortunately, we were on an end across the end of two alleys, and the one alley she was to come down. And I remember just across the alley from us was a bull that Brian Geiss Angus, and a couple others owned. And I'd actually shown the bull a time or so. But regardless, the Queen Mother wanted to see this bull. And so we're standing at our stall, my wife and I, and sister and brother-in-law, and I don't remember other family members probably. Any rate, she wanted to see this big, mature Angus bull. So I believe it was Brian that brought her out in the alley. Well, the security people around the Queen Mother, they just scattered with this great big bull and that. And I think, I'm not sure whether it was my wife or my sister that they stepped on her. One of them backed right up and stepped on her foot, I even think. And that, but anyway, they were, we got a bit of a chuckle out of that. But so this bull, and of course she walked right up to the bull's face and around it and whatever. And then as she departed that, they started down the alley and they just crossed that little bit. And she looked over, and right on that corner was this cow and calf that we had in a pen, loose. And she looked over and that, and then she looked at us, and with a big smile, she said, "Nice pair." and that, and then they were, moving her on and that. But the neat part was, as we all knew, or most of us got to know, she knew what she was talking about. She just didn't give you that. So that was my first involvement, and then I was kind of aware of it, and then in 2003 that was when Canada was granted. I believe it was at the World Secretariat in Denmark. Pardon me. They were granted the World Angus Forum for 2009, and at a board of directors meeting just prior to Don McKenzie and the then president of the Canadian Angus Association and Doug Fee, the CEO, came to me and proposed or asked if I would be chairman of the 2009. And I guess in some respect, it's maybe the highlight, and is the highlight. As I've said, sometimes I guess I got tricked again, and that by accepting that, but I did, and I guess I would have it would have added to my regret list had I turned it down, I guess, is what I'd say, and what an experience. Coming up to that, I got to attend and make a presentation at the World Angus Forum in South Africa. I attended the World Angus Secretariat in Ireland, made another presentation there leading up to ours, and so it was a highlight, and probably one of my proudest parts in the Angus was working with the people, the breeders, the volunteers across Canada, how it brought together. And we did some really unique things, and credit to a lot of volunteers and a lot of very talented people in Canada who came up with some fantastic ideas, and we had the enthusiasm of our breeders and our volunteers, and that to make a lot of things happen that were unique to World Angus Forums of the day.
Well, I was first, my experience with an Angus Forum was when it was held here in Alberta, in Calgary, in Spruce Meadows in 2009. And I'd heard about them before, but it never really, I guess I didn't understand really what all took place and what went on, and the size of the event and the people from around the world. Every country that has Angus cattle pretty well attends. So when it was here, I was really impressed. It was at Spruce Meadows. I mean, a first-class facility, and the cattle that come out of Canada. Well, there was even some from the U.S. here, but the cattle out of Canada the showing was tremendous turnout, and I just couldn't get over all the international people, and so and the people that you met. So I was more of a spectator of the event. I participated in watching and taking it all in, and so after that was over, I thought, that's something I would be interested in going to other countries and see. And so since 2009, I think I've attended every forum and every secretariat meeting since then, and of course, now you have Angus friends all over the world. So,
How many have you gone to, Earl?
well, everyone since '9. So,
you started
Yeah.
in '09 here,
yeah.
and then Mexico for sure.
The Secretariat meetings were next, and
Oh, okay.
I think that was in Argentina.
Oh, yeah.
And we went to Argentina, and then I think after Argentina was it the forum was in. Don't hold me to this. I should have looked it up, but I think it was New Zealand. So we've been to Argentina, New Zealand, Mexico, UK, Uruguay. I don't know if I missed one in there or not, but anyways.
I remember you talking about the beef you ate in Argentina, I believe it was. You said it was
Yes.
3 times a day, every day.
Yes, they were. I think the one thing I think maybe Canada did in 2009 was kind of set the bar for forums. I mean, it was first class event, and so then after you started going to whether it was secretariat meetings or forums, I mean, I think people were trying to. I'm not going to say match it, but they wanted to make sure that you came to an event that was. Well managed and organized, and everything was of quality, And so, but yes, for sure in Argentina, the Argentina barbecues that they put on for us. I mean, we would go out into the country after the meetings in the city. We'd go to the country for a week and travel around. Well, the meals, I mean, you would start off at one large ranch in the morning and finish about mid-afternoon, and then you'd go on to the next one, and at noon you had a huge barbecued beef meal, which was delicious. And then that evening, of course, they eat later than we do. You didn't eat at 6 o'clock, but somewhere around 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night, after you toured the second ranch of the day, you had another tremendous barbecue. And these barbecues at the ranches were all set up in great big tents, and all the tables had white linen, fancy glasses. Like, it was first class, absolutely beautiful, and really enjoyed it. Yeah. So you wished sometimes then, or a fellow like myself, that you might have known Spanish or Portuguese, depending where you travel with people in South America. But anyways, those people did a very good job of, there was always interpreters and did very good. And most the key ranch owners do speak English, so it was very good.
Just to add to that, Earl, I was lucky enough to go with you over to England and Scotland. And on the last one, I went as a representative of the Canadian Angus Association, and it was fabulous, in my opinion. It was when we started off south end of England and then moved with buses. You went all the way. It was just unbelievable.
Yes.
And then buses were clipped. They were missing cars by that much.
Yeah.
Have you been over there? It's crazy the way they drive. But anyway, the big highlight of that thing was the cattle were different. Some were our style, some weren't. But most of them were pretty large, and which was fine. That's what they're used to. But at night when we went to the hotels, this is my big deal. It was, we'd get in about 9 o'clock. Earl, you were in on it. Bob, your son-in-law, and so on, and Camille, and no, maybe Camille wasn't there.
No.
But anyway,
Bob and Marge.
We'd go into a hotel. They'd have a lounge or a bar or whatever, and Doug Henderson was there, and he'd hold court every night.
Yeah.
Every night. And we'd talk about what we did through the day.
Yes.
That was very little to talk there, but it was about old stories Doug told him. It's too bad we had do you remember that, Earl?
Oh, yes.
That was the best. And then, of course, we had to be up so darn early, but that didn't matter to anybody. It was
No.
But you're right. They did set the bar high, or Canada did. So we get over there, and it was fabulous. They treated us good. I always remember going in them buses, and they had music going and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, you could travel the world on those tours, and I mean, people said, well, it's a holiday. It is to a certain extent, but I'll tell you what, you're on the move. I mean, you're up in the morning at 6, and if you want to see the cattle in the country, I mean, lots of times it's midnight, and it's like that every day. You're traveling, meeting people, and looking at cattle, but it's worth every minute of it. I call it's like going on an all-inclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I think the person to get to do something like that is very lucky. I feel fortunate I got to do it, because if you just got in an airplane, flew into England, and you're going to tour around, you wouldn't get that. Not a chance. And,
that's the thing about all those tours. I mean, when you go on them, wherever they are in the world, you would have never got on those backcountry roads to see those herds. That like you said, if you flew in there and rented a car and tried to go see some Angus herds, you would never see it all that they can show you. It's
well, you were in Ireland, John. You must
Yeah.
have felt
Well,
the same way.
Same way, and you mentioned about the buses and whatever, and I mean, you'd be in some little village, and first off, you'd have to stop at the crossroad for a farm tractor pulling a trailer with a great big piece of construction equipment on it.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't, but then it was like, there was the odd time that those tour buses, they'd have to go ahead and back up just to make the corner. So it's a different world kind of a thing.
Good drive.
But we went, they would blend in just like Canada did, a bit of tourism type things along with whatever. But the hospitality and the meeting of the people and whatever is just foremost. And it didn't matter whether it was South Africa, whether it was Ireland or any of these other countries. My mom and dad were fortunate; they went to the Argentina one. The pride of ownership of rural people and farmers, ranchers, and that is universal in the world, and they allow people through that to come in there, and they put their best foot forward without a doubt, and that. But it's really neat to see that universal pride of ownership and breeding and whatever, and it didn't matter whether they were big or small in terms of cattle numbers, in terms of accomplishments or whatever, and like these gentlemen said, wow, you get to see some things, and you get to learn so much, and that from, it's not just the tourists, it's not this whatever. You find out about the true economy of the country. You find out about the true politics of the given day of the country, and yeah, we all have different perspectives on it, but by the time you're done, you really feel that you were there. You were in Ireland, or you were in Argentina, or whatever. You were really there and saw the country, not just the tourist attractions that you could see in a picture book or a movie. So
I think, and just to add to that, is that when you're traveling around the world to these different countries and analyzing each country's cattle, they may not be like yours at home, and it's amazing what each country has done with the Angus cow. They make it adapt to their environment, and what they have as far as the feed, what they got to feed them, whether they're grazing or whether they're confined, and the size of that Angus cow can go from 1,200 pounds to 2,800 pounds, and it just depends on their system for grading beef as to how they what size they want, but still, no matter what size they are, the good cattle.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how they compete against other breeds in other countries as well. So no, it's interesting to follow.
One other thing too, Earl and John, both, what I noticed, Canada and the United States would emphasize more of a show on the cattle and not the tour so much.
Mm-hmm.
Where you go to them other countries, the tour was the big deal.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I'd prefer the tour. But, we went to 2 shows in in the United
UK.
Kingdom, and I don't know, they were okay. I guess the whole point is that we didn't really know anybody that was showing, so it would
Yeah.
probably be the big deal. But I remember standing there thinking to myself, what, like a guy like Bud McBride was there, and
Yeah.
he must have been shaking his head, because them kind of cattle wouldn't work so good for him, you know. But that didn't matter. That was their deal. And
Yes.
I asked one guy about cows over there, and you were talking about a cow that weighed 2,800 pounds. Well, when they went to sell them for meat, they're worth like $7,000
Yes.
in our money. So that's why they, you know, it didn't bother them to have 'em big.
No.
And then remember that bull that we seen at that castle?
Yes.
And we had to guess the weight on him?
Yeah.
What the heck was that thing? He was,
It was over 3,500 pounds.
yeah.
35 or 36, somewhere right in there.
So you had to guess in kilograms, right?
Yes.
So like I don't know kilograms, so how could I? But you know who won that was Dwayne Emery.
Yes,
Oh,
that's
you,
right.
You know Dwayne Emery.
Yeah.
Yeah,
From
Rachel Angus.
He
Yeah.
won that.
Yeah.
Got a good big bottle of scotch out of the deal. I laughed.
Did you help him drink it?
No,
Yeah.
but he told me, he said, we got to do that someday.
They actually owned their own distillery.
Them people did.
Yeah.
Those people.
What was it called? Balden Rock or
Something
something?
like
But
that.
they had their own distillery too. It was quite a place.
Oh, that was something else. But a lot of them places over there, they have to do tourism to survive.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it until we were
Yeah.
there. And
Keep the state going was what they,
Well,
yeah.
I think
we're
on that
getting that way
estate,
here, too.
I think on that estate, those young children that were there were 25th or 26th generation
oh,
on there.
Ireland had a bit of that, and as you were touring, it was kind of deal. You'd be in the bus and that, and well, where's the next deal? Well, we're going to an ABC, and another bloody castle. Yeah, ABC, another bloody castle.
Yeah,
But some of them were strictly tourist type deals, and we got to see some private deals and that.
Yeah.
But again, to maintain the grounds, and I remember Jim Brown and that, and you know, the great horticulturist, so Jim Brown and I would be double four Angus. You know, we knew a tree from a bush and a flower, but that was about it. But anyway, we're wandering the grounds, and we were both just amazed at these estates and that would be throughout Europe and that. But in Ireland, it was just like, well, what would it take? You know, how long would it take to cut this grass? Who does all this gardening? I mean, they were just impeccable. But then you find out that, yeah, they have, whether it's a bed and breakfast type setup or they serve tea at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you pay to come in public, and tour buses pull up and all that kind of stuff to support it. But back to Brian's, where he mentioned, you know, that shows weren't necessarily the important feature, and really World Angus Forums, the World Angus Secretariat has a few, and I don't know that you call them guidelines, but a few necessities, and one of them is that they have a secretariat meeting, and this is where at the time that I was going, 19 countries, official countries of the world, would give their reports of the state of Angus in their particular countries. And the other thing was a bit of a technical conference, and that might be, you know, certainly would vary from where you were, but probably more to do with the timing. So early on, there was a lot of talk on embryos and whatever, and that. So that was components that were, I guess I'll say, required. And then after that, it was wide open. South Africa, great deal. The only two Angus at the actual forum were a black Angus bull and a red Angus bull that were at the front of this big convention center, one on each side of the steps that you entered the first day. That was the only animals in the whole, at the forum itself. And that,
Wow.
and then you went out and toured afterwards and that. So, like Brian said, in Canada, our approach was we wanted to allow the Canadian breeders to showcase their breeding programs. And so The committee that I was actually asked to set up, and one of my criteria was that I got to pick the committee, and we picked I picked some breeders and people that were, I knew were thinkers and doers, and as I always said, I'll find, a group of people that are smarter than I am and put them on the committee. And that's pretty easy to find, but any rate, so we came up with some unique things, but one of the first unique things is we put together of what we thought were some of the necessities, and in that first draft, a show was not, and a sale were both listed, but not necessary, So we actually went to the 7 regions in Alberta, provinces and the Maritimes, and said, would you like to bid on? We're going to give you all the opportunity to bid on hosting the forum. We've got such a big country, it's not, it's not that there's an obvious place to hold it, I guess. It could be held anywhere in Canada, and a fantastic job done. So we allowed. So they went through it, but we gave them just a bit of a guideline of what they had to do secretariat-wise, what we felt that they needed, being afford the opportunity for breeders from all across Canada to showcase whatever. Shows weren't mandatory, sale wasn't mandatory, and that in that first draft. So long story short, we landed up Alberta and Saskatchewan were the 2 provinces who made a bid. And in September of 2004, the formation committee or selection committee made up of 7 of us from across Canada, and that sat down and we had 2 unbelievable great presentations, proposals which we called bids. And I guess after that was done and before we'd even selected, there was, and I don't remember who, but there was a couple of us that said, we know this is going to be, we're convinced, a fantastic World Forum that we're going to have. And that was 2004, and we were looking ahead to 2005. And that,
Wait,
pardon?
you were looking ahead to
Yeah.
9.
Yeah, this was a bid for 9, but it was September 2004 when they submitted the bids. That's how far ahead.
Had to plan a long ways
And,
in
and
advance.
Alberta got it, and part of that, Alberta's bid was to put it at Spruce Meadows, which was a very unique thing to do on that. And so world-class facility, not a cattle facility, and so our first question is, is this doable? And so with a little bit of checking that out, Saskatchewan had a tremendous and would have been a tremendous location and hosts, but at any rate, Alberta was chosen, and then the whole country got behind it. That was the neat part, and as it turned out, some of the unique things were the youth. Youth had never and in questioning people, I hadn't been to much at that time. In questioning people, youth had never been part of it, and North America we're big on youth in agriculture and in our beef. So that was a component we wanted included. There was, the tours and some of the things, but Doug Fee, the CEO, I'll give him credit. He somehow came up with this idea, and whether he heard it, stole it, or came out of his dreams or head, but he championed the embryo program. And we invited countries, all 19 countries, to supply us with embryos of their genetics. And we took the embryos and worked with embryo companies here in Canada, and we worked with then the Remington Cattle Company, who's supplied the recips and the management and whatever. And at the World Angus Forum in 2019, we had embryo calves from a number of countries around the world. Not all 19 of them, but a number of them that were on display to show their genetics that we could compare and visitors could compare and that. And the other thing I would like to mention is, we were pretty fortunate of our timing and technology in that We were able to utilize the World Wide Web. And we were able to communicate and send out our message and send out updates. And you know, you look back and I'm just not a technical whiz at all in that. And I do the emails in my corporate life. I've had to use emails. But my wife, Jan, I've got to give her credit. She developed a website that was utilized and became just a tremendous asset to us and around the world. And I really think that helped contribute to both Canadians becoming involved and people worldwide. And that's something that in 1985, for instance, they didn't have that ability to utilize that. And I did a little calculation, a little research, and I apologize, I can't remember whether it was for 3 years or 2 years prior to World Angus Forum, I personally averaged 43 emails per day to do with World Angus Forum.
Wow.
43.
Yeah.
Some days none, some days something would, and if you tracked it, I think some of it was something would come out on the website and they would just plunk in, what about this, what about that? And then that would be, some of them would be back and forth. Of the 43, some of them, it wasn't 43 unique. Some of them might be 5 or 6 back and forth with somebody. Might have been with Maureen Armitage in our office, might have been. The other thing we did is we set up a separate financial-wise. And we used purchase orders for everything we did. That came from my corporate world. And Doug Fee and Maureen Armitage in the office and whatever, Maureen and I, and other people worked on that.
Well, I think one other thing, though, that they really got going in Canada, and John, you brought it up, was on the youth, because then the other world conferences that I attended after that got that youth component in, and it really skyrocketed and got the younger people, not that they weren't involved before, but I mean really involved, and they were in the program. There was a, program scheduled in, and New Zealand was huge, and the UK, and some of the things, different things compared to here, what they had to get involved in, the youth did, but it really made, I think, made the youth shine within the World Forums. And I give Canada credit for getting that started.
So we had a youth show here and a committee. So our formation was at 7 people or whatever. And then when we selected Alberta, then we brought in, I think it was 3 of the Alberta bid people to sit on what we call the organizing committee. And then we had all the subcommittees, and we actually had a subcommittee for youth, and okay, we want youth components. You form a committee, Colton Hamilton and Ricky Fleming and that, bring some of your cohorts, your people of your age, some youth that are involved, bring them together. You decide and you come back to us with a proposal. And we did that with everything from shows to whatever, and that was neat. I forget how many youth, but there's a picture in one of the books I've got there of the youth, and I'm sure there's even a few people missing from the picture, but it's a pretty extensive group of people, and they had their own show. They called it the Young Guns Show, and that's what they named it, and so, okay.
And these other countries expanded on it to a certain extent. It wasn't just showing cattle. When they got to New Zealand, I mean, they had to, they showed them butchering of cattle. They had to do fencing. They had to drive front-end loaders. Oh, you name it. Anything to do with farming or ranching, and put the kids through quite a test. I'll tell you, it was interesting watching them participate and compete against each other. So, no.
We also included them in, like our gala banquet was how it was labeled, and there was over 900 people sat down for a meal, and the youth were included in that. I mean, they were not excluded from some of that kind of stuff. Or if there was something they weren't going to be interested in, you might have an alternate, and they actually had a meeting or two, and I remember one of the events we had, they were off somewhere else and had their pizza party or whatever it was, and so, you know, the youth committee really thought of the whole process of the World Angus Forum here, and like, and that was great that other countries picked up on it and expanded on it and whatever, but we had 22 countries in total officially registered here. I don't remember the number of people even. It was huge. There was 7, we landed up with, we utilized all what we call the barns that were converted, the stable barns, to, there was thousands of panels, you know, corral panels, steel corral panels used for displaying and tying animals. There was 1,018 Angus entered in the show, and it wasn't the major part of the forum. There was lots of cattle in displays that weren't. You know, our display of cattle, we had worked with a couple of young people and that were in Junior Angus and whatever, and they showed a couple of their cattle, but the rest of our display was herd bull and represented our breeding program as many, but didn't go to the show ring and that, and so it was neat. And we had a separate red and black show and a young gun show and that, so it became, there was a sale, and in the sale Brian McKenzie and Rob Hollowaychuk worked on it, and again, it wasn't to be a major feature, but it was very successful. Picture that I looked at as I was kind of refreshing myself was just armed. They were just side by side. You couldn't even move in that great big arena, riding arena, where it was. But they really focused on things like embryos and pics of herds and stuff like that, which allowed international people to participate if they so wished in that kind of a thing. Some of the things, Bob Prestige, who was our subcommittee person for marketing, and really it was for him to market to Canadians why they should come, and he came up with some interesting facts and figures when it was all said and done and whatever. But yeah.
One thing you said there, John, was that the number of cattle that were there.
Yeah.
It seemed to me that at that time, that was the biggest show in North America ever for numbers. Up to that
Single
time.
breed show. Yeah, that's what they said.
Now the
Yeah.
American Angus Junior show is probably bigger
Yeah.
now, but
Yeah.
but at that time that was huge. But it took you 3 days to walk through the barns. You know?
Well, you just, that was one of Bob Prestige's deal. You didn't have time to get through it all.
No,
You just
it was
plain
big.
didn't.
But
The
they-
displays were fantastic.
They are a lot of work, them things, and you know, I know you guys kept your budget pretty close to the limit and worked out good. But you know, after it was all said and done, they went on these tours, and I keep going back to that. But I remember Larry Toner was in charge of the tours, and
Yeah.
and you know, I don't think any of us took that too seriously. We didn't. We thought it was over. You know,
Yeah.
we should have been on the tour too.
That's right.
We missed out on
Yeah,
it.
after I'd gone to other world forums around the world, I
Yeah.
thought, why didn't I get on the bus and go on the tour
Yeah.
with the international people? Because
Right.
I would have loved to tour through a lot of
Yeah.
them herds that some of them I hadn't seen. But one other thing that you know, the forum in Canada did, I think it really brought up the interest in the Red Angus in Canada, because a lot of Americans came up to that forum, and Red Angus breeders seen what was available here in Canada, and there was a lot of Red Angus cattle after that went to the United States, because they couldn't get over the size, the structure, and the quality of the Red Angus up here. So that was a real shoe-in for the
Yeah,
Canadian
for that.
Red Angus breed as well. So yeah, no.
We, you know, we talk about the youth component, but and that going to Spruce Meadows, which was a unique opportunity, and that, but it also created challenges because they had never dealt with cattle, Yeah, I mean, that's a world-class show jumping event, or they put on a number of events, but their venue is top end worldwide. But at any rate, we had challenges of the logistics, and it was everything from, okay, when the cattle arrive, how are we going to do it? What are we going to do for night tie-outs? Get them out of those barns. What are we going to do with manure? What are we going to do? And the details that our volunteers came up with Spruce Meadows, and that when people arrived, they were met, exhibitors. Instead of being pushed off to the back corner, they had the closest parking lot, if you will. We had free camping for everybody, whether if you were an exhibitor, if you were registered, and that either commercial or whatever, free camping. We had for people that didn't even register, if they wanted to come for the day, they couldn't buy tickets to come to an official meal or whatever during the event. We just couldn't. There were just too many numbers. But they had free parking, number one, when they arrived, and they had free shuttle from the parking lot to wherever they wanted to go, and the free admission for everybody. Yeah. And we got a number of people from other breeds that came, and that's neat. That's added to it. And we had a number of other breed people who came and volunteered and helped out on different areas and that. So it brought that purebred cattle sector together there. Well, the first day of the official day of the forum after the pre-tour, and that was called the Ranch and Heritage Tour. Yes. And some of the heritage ranches were toured, and the one that we were to end at the end of the day was Larry Sears' family Flying E Ranch, just west of Stavely, and that's where we were to end up that night for a big barbecue and whatever. And they're commercial Angus breeders, use purebred Angus bulls, and a long history, family in ranching in Alberta, and fantastic people. And that was probably one of the biggest disappointments, was we had absolute torrential rains prior to that, to the point where we just couldn't get the buses there, and a number of other things. And some of the things that made it even worse is they had a storm, I believe a hailstorm, go through about a week ahead, and they had landscaped around their yard, more flowers, and in traditional, both rural and cattle-wise people, you're proud of your place, but you really spiff it up, and so they had replanted all this stuff, and then this torrential rains come and couldn't. So we're scrambling. What do we do? And Dice Bolduc is one of the people that was on our foundation committee, or our founding committee, and we landed up, long story short, at the Stavely Community Center in Stavely, and it's a pretty good size facility, nothing fancy, and caterers and everything put together as the buses are going other places, and it was just one of those things when you look back, you say, oh my God, how did we do that? And again, it was people. Yeah. Everybody just tucked in, and
they squeezed in that old hall.
Yeah, we squeezed them in. Yeah.
They liked it.
And it was great.
It was.
Yeah, I've got a picture of some people from Ireland and myself, and we're there, and to take the picture, you had to kind of move some people out to get the picture almost. But and the Larry Sears family were still our hosts, but it was certainly a disappointment for all of us, and that. But they just adapted to it as the rest of us did, and it was there was challenges all the way. At the end of the day, financial, we were on the positive side by a little bit, and did everything that we thought possibly could do. And
one other thing I see as we move along, in these forums, that is that, you know, at one point, a lot of time we were discussing genetics and, like you mentioned, well, when embryos, calves were born and how to register them, or they're throughout the Angus community in the world. But it's kind of changed, and now a lot of those Angus countries with Angus, you know, have an Angus beef program, and a lot of them are you know, helping market the product for the breeders as well. And there's usually always a segment on the program now on you know, the consumer and what's the consumer want, and UK was very good at it, bringing in some of their top stores, grocery chains and whatnot, and discussing, you know, how they can how they market to the consumer and how we can get actually more beef sales into the to the consumer, and the safety of beef. So it's interesting how as you go along times change, and it's kind of consumer driven really if you look at it, no matter where you are in the world. But anyways, I just found it interesting how that's changed in time too.
Well, 2007, my wife Jan and I were amazed in Ireland as we would walk down streets in a town, village, whatever it was, and you'd come to a meat shop, and not just a meat shop, it could be other shops as well, but the prevalence of signs saying Irish beef, Irish lamb, Irish eggs, or whatever it be, and they in 2007 were really promoting, and they didn't call it local, and it maybe wasn't the 100-kilometer or mile or whatever that we talk about here now today, but it was Ireland, by Ireland, and when you went in, and I remember one, and I don't remember the town that we actually went into and spoke with the gentleman behind the counter, the butcher and whatever, and he was pretty well educated on why, you know, you should buy Irish beef or Irish lamb or whatever, and they at that time, their beef cuts and their beef quality was different, measured different than what ours was, but they were promoting that to the consumer.
Yeah. Oh.
But I think the other thing that our World Angus Forum did was really exactly what Earl said. Was it really exposed a lot of Canadians to World Angus Forums, to the Angus world, that otherwise didn't. So the effort and whatever that it took to put that on was well worth it, and whether you as a breeder or me as a breeder reaped any financial benefit immediately or not at all, that wasn't really what it was about. But you know, it was making those friendships, making those business relationships, making people aware of Canada and what we stand for, but the Canadians there was just a huge amount of them that participated that had not participated, maybe in not only World Angus Forums, but hadn't even in interprovincial wise, and they were maybe had done, you know, attended their local shows more or less, and that was kind of it. And maybe the highlight was going to an agribition or a farm fair or something, or the Royal Winter Fair, and was kind of the highlight. Well, and then all of a sudden it just opened it up to a different world. And that's where Earl mentioned he kind of got going in it.
Yeah. No, I highly recommend anyone that's interested in the breed and traveling and going to the secretariat meetings and the forums. It's even if you can only go once, it's worth the experience. You will enjoy it, that's for sure. Yeah.
Probably the biggest that I experienced, and I've only been to a very limited number, but was South Africa, both climate-wise and you know, Brian talked about different environments and how different cattle, and Earl did too, Oh my gosh, I remember we toured there the day after, and then I had to actually come home. It was cabin time and whatever, so I didn't get to do the full post tour. But we were at a gentleman, Peter Pence was his name, and Peter Pence turned out they owned a big winery and whatever, but he had Red Angus cattle, and that's what we started with the tour, or did tour his place in that, and he he was involved in, and his workers brought the cattle up to a corner just out in the middle of, I don't know where we were, it wasn't in the yard, so to speak, and and held them there, and you got out and you just looked around and thought, my God, what do they eat? How do they survive? And that, to see that. And then when you talk to them as to how they marketed their cattle, and that it's just completely different. It's a different world. We went to another place, and again, sometimes it's the sidelights that you remember. We went to another one, and I remember their holding pen that they brought cattle into, which was maybe an acre, and that, gosh, as a human, you could hardly walk on it for the rocks. So obviously, they didn't need a hoof trimming table, and that. As opposed to going to Ireland where you were wearing, a lot of times you might need rubber boots and that, and so the cattle need to adjust to that. But that one that I refer to in South Africa, their Angus cattle were a portion of it. The other portion was table fruit, and they specialized in table fruit. So it wasn't to apples, for instance. It wasn't to produce X number of tons of apples. It was to produce X number of tons of apples, that a high percentage of those apples would be the kind that the rich and famous, I guess we'll say, or could afford the hotels, the whatever, could put in that big bowl out, and that. They were the top quality. But then, you'd say to them, okay, well, you do that with your apples, what about with your Angus? Well, we haven't got there yet. We haven't got there where we can, in the apples and other tree fruits, they could get a premium for those very top quality. But at that particular time, which was 2005, they couldn't get a premium, enough of a premium for top quality beef. Never mind top quality beef compared to that. So it wasn't a priority yet to really identify what's the best carcass. It was a priority to get an Angus that could get to slaughter, the fastest or the best, or get to weight or whatever that might be, but it wasn't a priority for that quality. So that development wasn't there yet at that time. So that was interesting.
The other thing, when you're traveling to other countries, you get on what I call their time schedule, and so, and so when you're in South America, Uruguay, Argentina, Brazil, when 12 o'clock comes along, and everything comes to a standstill, because it's going to be dinner, huge barbecue meal, be some great wine, but it's going to be 2 hours, and they won't start up again till 2 o'clock. And so, for us Canadians and Americans, sometimes you don't take much time for lunch. You're on a hurry, you're doing this, but nope, she's at a standstill, and you visit and socialize, and then at 2 o'clock, okay, they'll start back up. And at some of those ranches, like in Uruguay, they would literally, they had nice seats and stuff for us on the ranch. We'd sit there. They literally moved 2,000 head of cattle in front of us. There'd be about 40 to 50, they're cowboys, gauchos, and they'd bring up like a pen of bred heifers, or the 2-year-olds with calves and the 3-year-olds. But literally during the afternoon, 2,000 head of cattle went across the front of you in a pasture close, and those gauchos, they could bring those cows right up to you, right there. Just bring them right up, and the cows weren't wild. You would think, well, gee, that many cattle, yeah, but nope, they were used to those horses and they could hold them cows right there. They could, if a guy spotted a cow and, oh, gee, that one looks good, you know, they would cut one out and bring it right to you. So yeah, so it was interesting to where you had 2-hour lunch, or you get to the UK or, well, New Zealand, 3 o'clock. I mean, they're boiling the kettle and you're going to have a cup of tea. So you got to the ranch. I mean, that's what you're having. I mean, they're just big old boiled on the stove kettles and boiled the water up. And so yeah, it was interesting. Everyone has their own thing. In Mexico, of course, you got to have a little tequila once in a while.
You know, Earl, that's kind of interesting you mentioned that part, because I don't know, I'd have to find the thing around here. I judged the National Angus Show in Guadalajara, Mexico. And I think it was 1998. Do you remember, Tina? I had it here. So it's in one of our showcases anyway. Anyway, so I'm judging, you know, and there's a lot of cattle to go through. And they're not the speediest guys getting them in the ring, you know. Like, but they're trying, you know, and we're getting her through. And by God, 12 o'clock hits, or 1 or whatever it was, and completely stopped. Go to this restaurant on the grounds, and they get at her. I mean, they had mariachi bands going, and they were going, and they're trying to pour you tequila and everything. Well, I'm the judge. I ain't going to take any of that. You got to behave yourself, you know. So anyway, 2 o'clock we go back, finally. These guys are half asleep because they've had the tequila or beer or whatever. The guys laughed. But anyway, that night we ended up judging the Grand Champion Bull under a 50-watt light bulb, and it was pitch dark. That's how that went.
Well,
they,
so,
you know, what do you do?
yeah,
No big deal.
well, they don't, you know, it's, well, we always laughed the first day on the buses, and when we were in Mexico, we started out and 8 o'clock sharp, and I might have got out of the parking lot at 9, and that was basically an everyday occurrence. And then the Germans, the group that were there from Germany on it, and we know them well, we razz them and they would razz us, but so they started coming out at 9 o'clock. Well, then one day we're going to leave at 8:30. Well, the Germans aren't here yet. Oh God, it was hilarious. Yeah.
Sure. No, the time part there isn't real important.
No.
Well, I was down there with Switzer one time. He was judging the national in some city down there, and they postponed it for a day because one of the big dogs owners,
Yes.
he couldn't be there that day. So they just put it off for another day.
Oh.
I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
What are me and Switzer supposed to do?
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's a guy we should.
Yeah.
Too bad he couldn't have been there, because he would have told us a bunch of stuff about showing cattle down there and that. You know, every country's different as far as showing cattle. There's no doubt about it. You know, like when we were over in Scotland, England, Ireland, John, you would have noticed this too. I mean, they got their white.
The rubber
Gown.
boots and their white.
cloaks on.
Yeah.
Them halters are about that big around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in Mexico, well, half the time they're pulling them on the wrong way around, and it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not so perfect either. Maybe we just think we are. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's always
Well, that's exactly right. It's the way they do it. It's not that we're right. It's just different. It's, but it's enjoyable, you know, taking in other people's culture and their country.
One thing I remember in England, or at that one show we were at, Earl, remember they had the right behind the show ring there was different, and I'll call them tents, but they were more like they were built huts or bars or whatever they were, and they belonged to each breed.
Yes. Yep.
Remember that?
Yes.
I think a lot of us spent a lot of time in there.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah,
that.
that's right. They all had their tent up, and so you could go to the Hereford one or the Angus one and
It was
whatever,
nice. I
and
love
it was a lot of hospitality
It
in
was
there.
a
They were very
hospitality
good to us
tent.
folks,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah.
They were.
Yeah.
And here's something else there too. There was no bleachers or seats at the shows.
In the
Not that I
UK.
ever seen.
No, in the UK, I never seen them.
No, so anyway, you know, you get tired after a while, so you go in them bars and sit down.
Well, yeah. It was
So-
hot out standing in that sun. Yeah.
Didn't matter who won.
But you know, challenges, Tina asked the question, or asked, alluded to the challenge of the day before. In Ireland, actually, the day before the Secretariat meeting, we were to be at the what's the name of that one-day show? It's longest and biggest one-day show and whatever. Well, in the first time in, I don't know, 100 years, it got rained out. Well, to be rained out in Ireland is really something, you know. So then it's like, okay, what do? Well, Jen and I had been over there a few days early and done a little bit of a tour, and we're being hosted by Jerry Smith, and that is, you know, he's been over a number of times, he and his wife, and we're hosting and we ran up in with Bob Prestige and another character, and so we got to then an impromptu tour of a couple Angus places, including a lawyer. Actually, both husband and wife were lawyers in Dublin, and they had taken over the family farm from an uncle. And that was my first exposure, and we got it later in the post-tour of the Secretariat meeting, where in Ireland, it wasn't an option to get to a point where you hit retirement and put your ranch farm for sale. No, as long as there's surviving members of the family, they take it over. And they had the ability to put away enough money to educate or university educate their children, put away enough money that mom and dad could retire at a given age or when they so choose, without having to diverse of their assets and that. So the 50 steers that they ran and marketed at about 30 months of age, and the 100 and some odd ewes that they ran their lamb program, and maybe one other thing as well, afforded them enough and not to do that, and so it wasn't. So our first exposure was this lawyer and his wife and that great people who from the legal world, and it was the uncle who had owned the farm. They weren't involved and hadn't even been raised on either of them on farm or at least Angus breeding, but it was like there was no one else to take it over, so it was kind of like, well, what could we do? We had to take it over because it's got to stay in the family. Yeah. And the manager, the old fellow who was the manager for years and years and years for the uncle, manager of the herd, well, he had to stay, like he came with the place, kind of a thing. And then we go there, and that he takes us there, I should say. We're touring and that, and here's a bunch of Canadian Angus genetics in the pens. And that. Wow. And knew some of the people from Alberta and whatever that they had bought, and he didn't really know them that well. Well, these came from so and that. Do you know them? Well, of course we know them. Yeah. Well, you know, and so he was learning at the same time. But that was the exposure that we got. And then impromptu we got on his boat, his yacht, and toured the Shannon River, all the different. Through the locks and stuff that we wouldn't otherwise get because we would have been in the mud at the show, and then of course he disappears down below. That good lawyer that he is, comes up with his paper bag with his clear white hooch, you know, and things like that, you know, that you remember years later, and just great people, and then we toured a couple other very small little deals, but there was one, and I forget the name, and my wife still refers to, that's the place that we were in the village, and the funeral home and the pub were the same building, owned by the same and operated by the same people. And if you want to find somebody there, and if they're not at home and don't answer, well, they're at the pub. And as you drove through these villages, you talk about the buses, you know, just passing like this. Well, in Ireland, there's no parking. So what they do is they just pull up on the sidewalk and that. So here's, you're going through a village and you're snaking through the deal because there's cars parked half on the sidewalk, half on the traveled road, and that in these little villages and things like that, you know, we just don't.
It's different.
Yeah, it's so different. But the one little herd that we deal in, I think they had maybe a dozen head, was all they were great cattle and great people, and it was an impromptu kind of a thing, but it's kind of neat. But there was the challenge here. These, Irish people had organized all this, and it was going to be a highlight for a number of us to go to this one-day show. And as
Couldn't do
couldn't do it, right? First time in,
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
But they just adapted. I don't know what the rest of the guys did, but that was that. We hadn't joined up with the
You
main
didn't care?
tour. We were just,
Oh, you guys.
and
Yeah,
that's
that's interesting. They, one other thing, like I was thinking about a little kid I met over in Scotland,
Oh, yeah.
and me and him have kept in touch since he
Wow.
was.
Oh,
Well, he happened to be the same age as my grandson.
Oh, yeah.
My youngest grandson. And so they're both 11 now. And I'm lucky enough I had an Angus hat with me from Canada, and I gave him that one.
Oh,
I'll tell
he
you
was
what.
happy.
Oh, we're friends for life. That's it.
yeah.
But that's a young kid. I mean, look at all the relationships that went on with
Yeah.
Earl that you met and John.
Yeah.
Tremendous. You kind of wish you could have maybe remembered them all. You just
Yeah.
don't. But
well, the thing for each forum too, like when you go, and it's the local culture, like the entertainment. You might be in the country and they're feeding you at a community hall or someplace, and then they bring in the local entertainment, whether they're singing, dancing, and it's youth,
Oh.
it's kids, it's adults, and
Right.
it was just, that's always interesting to pick up on that stuff as well.
I think the world could learn a lesson from the way they look after their auction marts. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
They're as clean as this place right here.
Yeah,
And they'd had a sale the day before.
yeah,
And we went there to both of them, and they have these hoses that, if I remember right, they come out of the ceiling, and
Wash it.
after every sale they're washed off. And that's a big deal over there because of disease. Eh?
yeah. it's-
And I think we could learn a little bit of a lesson in
Yeah.
Canada, especially.
That one auction market up in the north there, north of Inverness, what was it called there, Dingwall?
Mhm.
It was, they built new, it was unreal, but they kept the history. They had a room upstairs full of the history of the local auction market as well.
Yeah, that was
And
neat.
it was unreal. And actually there, people came, like that's as far north, which was quite a ways up in Scotland where we went. But people there come from all over with their herds displays.
Yeah.
And there was people there that come by boat. There's the little islands off the eastern side of Scotland there. And they'd been traveling for 2 or 3 days. Time they loaded up and got to the ferry, come down there. And we were just there for one afternoon, but they come all that way to show us their cattle, and it was very
Yeah,
good
that's very
displays.
cool.
It was really good. That whole auction market, it was huge, was full of displays, so.
So
Yeah.
they would sell, like, the way I understood it anyway, cattle one day, and might skip a day in there, and then they'd do sheep, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you thought? too,
Right.
or- It was unbelievable, and nice material, like them pipes that
Yeah.
it was something else. I was impressed with that as much as anything when I was there.
Yeah.
I've
Then
got
that-
some pictures.
Yeah. Then
But
we
the
were,
difference in Ireland was how they got the cattle to the auction market, or sheep, any of the livestock, and that, it's just so much different from North America, because we went to the one and it was a sale day. And there's a lineup as we come down with the bus down the street. We're passing this lineup, and most of them are like Audis and Mercedes-Benz and whatever cars with a trailer hitch with a little trailer on the back with 2 head in it, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And we never saw a big truck of any kind hauling cattle actually
No.
at that time. And
No.
that, and, yeah, it was.
well, the other one there too, the other market, wasn't it Sterling? That's where the famous bull sale is.
Yes.
They have, and a lot of history was there too. But well, the other thing though, you talk about those Audis and pulling those stock trailers. The other thing, we'd be out on a major freeway in the UK, and then there's a fella out there going down the major freeway with his tractor, and everyone knows the people slow down, they go by him, and they don't try and run them over here like in Alberta on the QE2. If I got out there with my tractor, I'll tell you what.
Yeah. I'll make her back.
I won't, Brian.
Do you remember that one spot we were going down with the bus? And this guy's coming along with his tractor and his baler, or hay bind, whatever it was. He had the right of way.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And
Ireland is the
we
same.
had to back up and let this guy, I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Oh, yeah.
But, no,
And
interesting.
them guys know how to grow crops over there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. They had wheat with heads on them that big. You remember that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
impressive.
But
But I guess they've been doing it forever.
Moisture
Yeah.
and fertilizer.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking they might go out there like Herbie knows and pick all the wild oats.
Yeah,
by
maybe.
now.
Yeah, maybe.
So,
Oh.
it was good though. They you know, they seem like small countries, but they get a lot of production out of it,
Yeah.
don't they?
Yeah.
Out of-
Oh,
out of
yeah.
cattle, out of
Unreal.
grain, out of
Climate.
sheep.
Yeah.
You know, it's, yeah.
No.
Apparently their sheep are good over there too. I discovered that. I don't know much about them, but way different breeds than we have.
Mhm.
Of course, we're not a big sheep country, but it's big time over there.
Well, you said you didn't know much about sheep. I don't know anything about them, so.
Did you go look at them though, Earl? When you
I
went?
couldn't get over the size of them.
Yeah, that's what.
The size and to me, the thickness of them,
Yeah.
you know, was what I picked up on.
Meat.
But,
I mean,
yeah.
they're-
Well, remember,
yeah.
they're like the cattle, almost like
Yeah.
Belgian blues, you know.
That's right.
They're
Yeah.
neat. Big bubble in the bottom.
No.
Apparently they're good. That was something I noticed over there in the shows, was huge sheep shows. Like
Yeah.
Big. And that's another thing, Tina. When you went, like if you wanted to go in the cattle barn over there to look at the cattle during the show, well, like the show's going on, the guys are getting their cattle ready, it's all blocked off. You can't get in.
Yeah, it's hard to get around.
Yeah.
Whereas in Canada, we should do something about that because
Yeah.
somebody's going to get hurt, especially a little kid.
Well, the thing in UK shows is that they were like shows when I was growing up here. When you went there was everything. I mean, when at those UK shows, there was the cattle, but the horses and different breeds of horses. Well, the different breeds of cattle. I mean, there was cattle breeds there that I hadn't even seen before, and not huge numbers, but they all brought them there so they had a show. They had a show, and sheep and chickens, rabbits. Down in the UK, or in England, that show we went and walked around the grounds. Well, there was different breeds of chickens galore. I wouldn't know half of them, but you know, like a real old country fair. But this thing was huge. It
Well,
was
they don't have like wasn't that the Royal Highland we were at? Was that?
up in Scotland, but down the, what was it,
Well,
three
yeah.
county show or something
That's
in
right.
England it was called.
But there's no Midway or nothing there.
Oh, no.
It's-
No,
it's-
no,
it's
they
all-
don't have
It's
that.
all to do with agriculture.
Yeah, huge trade
Big-
show area.
Big deal.
So,
I
yeah.
loved it.
No, it was good.
You betcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then you get to Mexico. When I was at the last show I was there, they brought in the whole facility and set it up in a field.
Oh,
Like the
Yeah.
water, the tent,
Oh, yeah.
and it was huge.
Everything.
wow.
And it's a portable barn, I guess,
Yeah.
you might say. I don't know.
Wow.
That's how they do it.
Yeah.
That was that time Switzer and me were down there and he was judging. And they said that the show, they'll pick us up at 8 in the morning. Show's gonna start at 10 or whatever. We had to go about 40 miles. Bob says, well, we better be ready to go at 8. I said, plan on about 10. It'll be about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's at, Bob, he's panicking. So 10 o'clock rolls around, in they come. Just perfect
Yeah.
time, and just exactly what I said.
Mexico time.
Oh,
Yeah.
they don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Oh, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
No.
That's the way it is.
But the World Farms or any type of international events with cattle can lead, we talk about people and the whatever, and we've had people that have contacted us, email wise or whatever, and we've had people that we've never met, and we had an example was a couple from Scotland. Their farm out of Edinburgh, and their son was way up north on some island or some darn thing with Angus cattle. But it was another Angus breeder that said, well, if you're going over there, you need to get a hold of, this one or that one, and they, our name, and they said, oh, and they're right close to the airport or whatever. So they go on our website and see all of this. Well, they send us an email. Well, we never met them, and they come and, well, would it be all right to tour? And we're going to do this and that. So they arrive, and no, they didn't want us to pick them up because they were getting in at night, and they'd get so they had a hotel, and then they get the rental car, and they came out. So they came out for an hour or two, and that, well, they were there for the day. And then we had a great time and found out about them, and they found out about us, and it all came from, you know, meeting someone else, and not meeting them. And same thing, some Mexicans came, and they brought the whole family, Calgary Stampede time a few years ago. And well, we'd like to see some Angus cattle because they owned restaurants in Mexico City. Yeah. And we want to see some Canadian Angus cattle, and no specific genetics, just came out, well, they were there most of the day. Brian, we had you come to talk to them about beef at our kitchen table. And
that's right.
And they've landed up buying beef, containers of beef, Canadian beef,
Really?
for restaurants in Mexico City.
Holy
They own
God.
5 restaurants and have others and associates that have, and that through the, you know, which they might have anyway, but again, it all came, well, you know, through that you meet someone who then passes your name on to somebody, and
it's contacts.
So Canada can be darn proud of what they've done with the breed as far as forums and hosting people and going back and so on. It's remarkable what's gone on over the years. Russia, I went there in 2004, and there was a whole bunch of us went over there of different breeds, even the Holstein were represented over there that time. And we were at a meeting, so to speak, and they were all sitting there, all these guys, and probably 80 of them, and I got up and gave my little spiel about the Angus breed in Canada. And after that was over, this old guy come and tracked me down, and he said, I bought cattle from your dad in such and such a year. And I said, you gotta be kidding me. And he says, yes, and we still got some of the descendants. And I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It's so neat when he said that to me. And that was see, we didn't see any Angus cattle over there.
Oh.
Nope. We seen crossbred, I guess. Seen lots of dairy, that type of thing. That's how big Canada's name is in the world, I guess you might say, with our genetics.
Yeah.
It's tremendous.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And
no.
we've always got somebody coming after us.
Yeah.
Trying to beat us out.
Well, no matter
we
what.
must have did a good job, because it was after that we started shipping cattle to
Russia?
Russia. Gary and Kate,
That's right, we did,
whatever. It was,
So that's what that mission was all about that time.
Yeah.
Well,
Russia
no
and
matter where
Kazakhstan.
I've gone to Angus Secretariat meetings or forums in the world, there's Canadian genetics there, you know, Canadians.
And I think leaders too, like the Canadians are leaders.
Yeah.
When it comes to a bunch of that stuff.
No, so.
It attracts buyers. Like that time, John, about Kate and Gary getting them deals done. That was a big deal.
Post BSE.
It was, and it was time. It was a time when we needed a little.
We were struggling.
You probably sold heifers in them.
No, I didn't.
Over to Russia.
No. I need to be excused for a minute, so.
That's fine.
But it was things like that, that reputation of our people that have been in the business here, like your dad and whatever, that's helped us to aid that, and we obviously need to keep that up, and the next generation is already doing that.
I think so.
And it's a constant change, but it's World Forums, it's those contacts that allow us to not only make new contacts with the next generation of people, but also adapt to the markets. And as was mentioned earlier, you know, we've really started to focus on consumers in the beef industry, and whether you're purebred Angus or whether you're a commercial cow-calf operation with whatever, and that, you know, we're in the beef business. And that's something that at World Angus Forums and other events like that we can talk about and expand those horizons, if you will. But again, it's people. It's all about the people.
This back to that Russian story that, I don't even know what year that would have been, that Dad sold all them bulls to them. Because they were all our bulls that were going to Calgary Bull Sale and so on. They were good ones, eh?
Yeah.
And they bought them out of our yard. It was through the Hereford Association.
Oh, wow.
They were handling
Yeah.
the deal. And at that time, the money was pretty good. That's why they took it, instead of waiting to
Oh,
go
okay.
to Calgary.
Instead of going to Calgary.
So anyway, they
Yeah.
shipped these bulls down to Halifax, it was Halifax. That's where they loaded them.
Oh
on
my
ship
goodness. Yeah.
there. And one of our bulls got in a fight down there, and they broke his leg.
Ooh.
And of course, back then there's no insurance.
Yeah.
And you know, the Hereford people, they paid for that bull.
Yeah. There you go.
So I've got a little soft spot for her.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
I'll never
Treated you
forget
right.
that.
Yeah.
You know
Well,
what it is?
cattle people are cattle people.
Gotcha. That was
Yeah.
John Hay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Remember him?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good favor. That's what they did.
But World Angus Forums, worldwide World Angus Secretariat, you know, we're pretty fortunate to have that, and most of the breeds, not all, but a lot of the breeds have similar type things, and you know, whether it's, I've been fortunate only in Canada, but to attend Charlet World Farm and some Hereford things and whatever different breeds and.
Yeah, me too. I went to the Simmental one.
And the Simmental, yeah, I was at the
St.
Simmental
Calgary
one.
Stampede
Yeah,
that time.
yeah. And it's, so it's afforded an opportunity for Canadian breeders to really broaden their horizons,
Yeah.
both genetics and
Oh, for sure.
contacts and
Yeah.
Definitely.
knowledge of the world. And that,
Yeah.
we got a lot of, we can get pretty closed in at times, but thank goodness we have these things to.
Yeah. Well, you know, Canada is great health standards, and you know, other countries look at that. It's fairly easy for us to export, you know, about anywhere in the world, and so
Yeah.
that helps. And then, of course, the quality of the livestock overall. So it is a big factor in it. So
So when's the next World Farm? Where's the next one? I got
Australia.
I should know
It's
that.
supposed to be-
Australia, right?
It was supposed to be next
Yeah.
spring, in 21.
So we'll see what COVID.
So it's on
Has on
hold
that.
because they were, you know, the planning now. Like we've been getting information from them on it. So
Okay.
it's just they're calling it postponed. So I was going to ask if you've heard anything about it. I said it'd be nice maybe if they just postponed it 2 years, and then you know it's going to be in
Yeah.
2 years' time. So, but it was supposed to be next year, and it's a forum, and it's planned. It's a
Yeah.
big one. So they're doing a lot of.
Now, is that in conjunction with that Royal Easter show?
Nope.
Oh, it's separate.
Yeah. It'll be about the end of April and the 1st of May.
Oh, okay.
So, but the major meeting part, I think, is up in Rockhampton, is what they
Oh,
said, is
okay.
what they were looking
No,
at.
but-
And they said they usually have a large beef conference up in there about this time, and so I think it was going to be part of it, is what they were
Yeah.
talking about. But it was all pretty well going to be on the eastern side. I mean, you landed
Yeah.
in Sydney and you kind of went south towards Melbourne and back up towards Rockhampton. So, yeah.
But Australia, there's a, you know, prime example that genetics, they've got a lot of North American genetics there. They've utilized not only live animal, but more semen and embryos and
Yeah.
whatnot, and Canadian American, a lot of American genetics in that, but then they are their own twist on them, and they've, you know, it's a big country with a diverse climate
Yeah.
and that, and we've got some friends that we've met down there and kept in touch with, and they have their challenges, but again, you know, it's the Angus breed is, you know, is a good representation down there, and a lot of good people there.
Yeah.
And they've attended. They've been a participant in World Angus Forums. I think you've probably had Australians
Oh.
and all the ones you've been on.
You betcha.
And
Great
that,
people.
and
Lots of fun.
super, you know, New Zealand, Australia, they've all been,
Yeah.
you know. great. So,